Diana Cooper was a 41-year-old homeowner living in Maple Falls, a quiet neighborhood where she took immense pride in the house and swimming pool she had worked years to acquire on her own. One morning, she went outside to find wet footprints leading away from her pool and a towel draped on a lounge chair, clear signs that someone had been using her property without her knowledge. Worried and a bit unsettled, Diana asked a few neighbors if they had noticed any strangers. However, most people brushed off her concerns, suggesting maybe a couple of kids had hopped her fence for a quick swim. Not wanting to create conflict, she decided to add a lock to the gate around her yard, hoping that small step would discourage further trespassing. A few days later, the mystery escalated. Diana caught sight of two teenagers, a boy named Ethan and a girl called Chloe, lounging by her pool. The moment she stepped outside to confront them, they bolted, leaving behind half-eaten snacks and more wet footprints. Irritated and determined to resolve the issue, Diana approached the teens' parents. She expected an apology or at least some acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Instead, Mrs. Collins, the mother, labeled Diana's reaction dramatic and dismissed the entire situation as harmless fun. Shaken by the parents' indifference, Diana installed security cameras around her backyard. Soon enough, she checked the footage and discovered not just teenage trespassers, but an entire group of adults casually using her pool. Outraged, Diana hurried outside and ordered them to leave immediately, threatening to involve the local authorities if her property rights were not respected. But the audacity of these neighbors only grew. Natalie, one of the women caught on camera, started gossiping around the block, claiming Diana was overreacting. Fed up with the blatant disregard, Diana decided to outsmart them. She secured her yard with stronger locks and treated the water with a special chemical dye that would turn it green if anyone swam without her authorization. To reinforce the message, she placed a warning sign and even a fake container labeled hazardous chemicals. Her plan was an instant success. The mere sight of a chemical warning was enough to scare off any would-be intruders. Natalie ranted online about Diana's excessive measures, but Diana stood her ground, calmly explaining that she had every right to protect her property. Finally, as a finishing touch, Diana installed a motion-activated sprinkler system. After soaking a few curious onlookers, the trespassing stopped altogether. Reflecting on the ordeal, Diana realized that people would continue to take advantage unless she firmly established her boundaries. Once she did, peace returned to her home, and her swimming pool remained her own private escape. Diana Cooper never imagined her peaceful life in Maple Falls could be disrupted by something as simple as her swimming pool. Yet here she was, increasingly frustrated by the audacity of neighbors who treated her backyard as if it were a public amenity. After working tirelessly to afford and maintain her house on her own, Diana couldn't ignore the indignity of discovering wet footprints and a towel left behind by unknown trespassers. Initially, Diana hoped a friendly inquiry would resolve matters. She spoke with several neighbors, including Mrs. Collins, mother to Ethan and Chloe, the two teenagers she had caught by the poolside. Instead of offering an apology, Mrs. Collins downplayed the situation, going so far as to call Diana dramatic for caring about unauthorized pool usage. Even more insulting was how easily the rest of the neighbors shrugged it off, as though using someone else's property without permission was no big deal. Determined to maintain control of her own home, Diana decided to add a sturdy lock to the gate around her backyard. She assumed this small measure would end the problem. But fate had other ideas. One afternoon, she noticed the gate wide open, the lock cut clean through. Checking her newly installed security cameras, Diana was shocked to see not just kids, but a group of adult neighbors lounging in her pool as if it were their own. Fury surged through her as she watched them chat, drink, and sunbathe without a hint of shame. Armed with proof, Diana confronted the trespassers face to face. She demanded they leave her premises immediately, warning that the police would be called if this continued. While most grabbed their towels and fled, Natalie, an especially outspoken neighbor, took offense. She posted online about Diana being overprotective and unneighborly, stirring up gossip around Maple Falls. Realizing that polite requests and basic security weren't enough, Diana devised a more elaborate plan. First, she reinforced her gate with higher fencing and a heavier-duty padlock, ensuring no one could casually snip it off. Then, she treated her pool water with a special dye formulated to change color if someone swam in it. Next, she placed a large warning sign near the pool entrance, complete with exaggerated language about hazardous chemicals to scare off intruders. Finally, she planted a fake chemical container near the filter pump, labeled with ominous symbols. The reaction was immediate. Rumors spread that Diana's pool was toxic, and no one wanted to risk a green-tinted swimsuit or a potential skin rash. Natalie doubled down on her online ranting, accusing Diana of going way too far. But Diana remained resolute. If the neighbors wouldn't respect simple boundaries, perhaps fear of chemical exposure would keep them away. Her tactics proved effective, but a lingering tension hung in the air. Diana refused to let gossip or pettiness shake her determination. When Natalie came to her door, complaining loudly that Diana was tarnishing the friendly spirit of Maple Falls, Diana calmly explained that her actions were a direct result of repeated intrusions and stolen privacy. To cap off her strategy, Diana installed a motion-activated sprinkler system that would drench anyone attempting to hop the fence. The first night it activated, startled shrieks echoed through the neighborhood, and word quickly spread that Diana's backyard was no longer easy pickings. Gradually, the trespassing ceased, and neighbors who had once laughed off her concerns now seemed to understand she meant business. Though it took time and a fair amount of money, Diana finally reclaimed her sense of peace. The wet footprints vanished, and the stifling dread of being perpetually invaded lifted. In moments of reflection, Diana recognized the unfortunate truth that some people only respected firm boundaries backed by tangible consequences. For her, though, establishing these boundaries was worth every lock, camera, and sprinkling apparatus she had to buy. No longer did she worry about wandering strangers in her backyard. Her swimming pool became hers again, a private haven in Maple Falls where she could relax without fear of uninvited guests. Ultimately, Diana had learned that if one doesn't set and enforce clear limits, others are all too willing to take advantage of even the smallest liberties. Marisol Bennett was a 43-year-old resident of Brighton Vale, a cozy suburb known for tree-lined streets and friendly waving neighbors. For years, Marisol had saved diligently to purchase the house she adored, complete with a private oasis in the backyard, a sparkling water retreat that was the envy of the cul-de-sac. She considered it her sanctuary, a reward for countless hours of overtime and careful budgeting. One summer morning, Marisol awoke to a peculiar sight. Damp footprints trailing across her patio and a discarded beach towel crumpled near the lounge chairs. Alarmed, she scanned the area but found no one around. As a cautious homeowner, she initially assumed a neighbor might have hopped the fence by mistake, but the more she thought about it, the more unsettled she became. Curious and slightly unnerved, Marisol approached several people in her neighborhood to see if they had noticed any suspicious activity. Everyone responded with indifferent shrugs or vague reassurances that it was just kids having fun. Frustrated, Marisol decided to secure her yard with a better fence latch and a heavier lock on the side gate. She told herself that would be enough to deter the random swimmers. That illusion shattered days later when she spotted two teenagers, a boy named Logan and a girl called Sienna, casually lounging in her water haven as though it were a community pool. Before she could confront them, they scrambled out of the water and bolted, leaving behind more damp footprints and half-eaten snacks. Determined to halt this intrusion once and for all, Marisol tried speaking with their parents. To her dismay, she was met with eye rolls and accusations of overreacting. Mr. and Mrs. Patel, the teens' parents, even called her uptight for making a fuss about something so harmless. This blatant disregard for her concerns roused Marisol's protective instincts. She installed high-definition cameras around her property and waited to gather undeniable proof. It didn't take long. Reviewing the footage, Marisol's jaw dropped as she witnessed a group of adults, not just teens, sneaking in to enjoy her water retreat at night. They brought coolers, towels, and acted as though they owned the place. Furious, Marisol marched into her yard during one of their late-night escapades, demanded they leave immediately, and threatened to contact the police if they ever returned. While most of them fled, one bold neighbor named Carolina took offense. She accused Marisol of destroying the friendly ambience of Brighton Vale. Even so, the brazen trespassers continued, and Marisol's fence lock was cut on 2 separate occasions. Realizing she needed a more inventive solution, she came up with a plan to make the intruders regret invading her property. First, she reinforced her gate with a metal chain, a tamper-proof padlock, and a motion sensor alarm that would emit a loud screech if someone tried to break in. Next, she decided to treat her water retreat with a pool dye designed to tint the water a murky green if anyone swam without authorization. Just to be thorough, she posted a large warning placard near the entrance, emblazoned with phrases like, "chemical hazard," and "swim at your own risk." For a final flourish, she positioned a fake chemical barrel, adorned with ominous labels, beside the filter station. The results were swift. As rumors spread that Marisol's backyard was now a chemically booby-trapped hazard, would-be intruders quickly thought twice about sneaking in. Logan and Sienna, the teenage culprits, apparently shared horror stories with their friends about weird chemicals turning the water an eerie color. Meanwhile, Carolina voiced her indignation on social media, casting Marisol as some sort of tyrant who refused to let her neighbors have a little fun. Marisol refused to back down. She reasoned that if these neighbors could so casually ignore basic property rights, a dramatic deterrent was warranted. Whenever confronted, whether online or in person, she calmly explained the lengths to which she had gone before resorting to such extreme measures. She had politely asked them to stop, installed basic security features, and even tried reasoning with those responsible. It was only after all that failed that she escalated to the chemical dye and warning signs. Many in Brighton Vale privately supported Marisol. Some had experienced milder versions of the same problem, teens trespassing to pick fruit, or curious passers-by using their driveways without permission. They admired her willingness to stand firm against the notion that private property was up for grabs. A few neighbors, especially those not fond of the midnight pool parties, thanked her for bringing attention to the need for respecting boundaries. Yet, a lingering tension persisted. Carolina continued to rail against Marisol online, portraying her as a killjoy with no sense of community spirit. A handful of others sympathized with Carolina, whispering that Marisol could have handled things more diplomatically. But Marisol's resolution never wavered. Her yard was her sanctuary, and repeated infringements had forced her hand. Looking for a finishing touch, Marisol installed a motion-activated sprinkler system that would soak anyone crossing into her yard uninvited. The first night it activated, startled yelps carried through the neighborhood as intruders ran off, dripping and cursing. Word spread quickly that Marisol's domain was no longer a place to trespass without consequences. Over time, the trespassing ceased altogether. Without the allure of free swims, and with the looming threat of dyed skin or drenched clothing, even the most brazen neighbors thought better of scaling her fence. Marisol breathed easier, knowing her property was secure and her sense of peace restored. In quiet moments on the weekend, Marisol would sit by her water retreat, relishing the absence of unwanted visitors. She reflected on the lessons learned. People often push boundaries when they believe there will be no repercussions. Only when she established firm rules and backed them with tangible deterrents did the intrusions stop. Though the ordeal had been draining, Marisol emerged with a renewed understanding of how crucial it is to stand up for one's rights, and how quickly others will exploit kindness if no clear boundary is drawn. Veronica Walsh was known around Pinewood Estates for her unwavering determination. At 45, she took great satisfaction in the cozy home she had meticulously upgraded over the years. The gem of her property was a well-maintained backyard pool, framed by lush potted plants and bordered by a new cedar fence. It provided her with a serene escape from the pressures of work and a scorching summer climate. Her tranquility shattered when she spotted wet footprints near the pool ladder early one morning. A soggy towel lay abandoned on a lounge chair, hinting that someone had enjoyed a midnight dip. Slightly unnerved, Veronica checked with some of her Pinewood Estates neighbors for leads. Everyone shrugged, with no one seeming particularly concerned. One person even joked that it was nice to share the pool with the community. Taken aback by the dismissive attitude, Veronica decided it was time to lock the gate leading to her backyard. If her neighbors wouldn't help, she'd secure the area herself. She hoped a sturdy padlock and a simple, private property sign would send a clear message. Those hopes were dashed days later when she heard splashing sounds from inside her house. Rushing outside, she discovered two teenagers, Brandon and Mia, giggling as they jumped off the pool's edge. The moment Veronica yelled at them to stop, they scrambled over the fence, leaving behind water droplets and half-consumed soda cans. Furious, Veronica knocked on the door of Mr. and Mrs. Belton, the teens' parents. Rather than apologizing, they shrugged and suggested she relax, asserting it was just harmless swimming. That's when Veronica realized she was dealing with a community that, at best, saw her yard as a convenient getaway and, at worst, believed private ownership was flexible. She installed security cameras, intent on catching further trespassers in the act. Sure enough, the footage revealed not just kids but a group of adults, some she recognized from a few streets over. Having a mini pool party one weekend afternoon while she was out. Outraged, Veronica raced home, confronted the uninvited guests, and threatened to involve law enforcement if they ever returned. Among the trespassers was Arlene, a bold neighbor who took offense at being kicked out. Arlene wasted no time venting online about Veronica's sense of entitlement. Meanwhile, the situation escalated when Veronica discovered the lock on her gate had been cut. She replaced it with a stronger, tamper-proof model, but it was still no guarantee the intrusions would stop. Realizing she needed a more formidable plan, Veronica decided to take a two-pronged approach: deterrence and psychological warfare. First, she treated her pool water with a special dye that would turn it a glaring shade of green if someone attempted an unauthorized swim. She placed a large caution sign, warning of potent chemicals, near the pool's edge. For added effect, she left a fake chemical drum, covered in ominous warning labels, next to the pump system. Word spread quickly around Pinewood Estates that Veronica's pool was hazardous. Some neighbors snickered at the spectacle, but it stopped the late-night dips almost immediately. Arlene complained louder than ever, labeling Veronica dramatic for using extreme tactics. Veronica remained unfazed. She pointed out that civility and courtesy had failed to keep trespassers away, leaving her with little choice. Still, the tension lingered. Arlene tried to rally a few residents, claiming Veronica was damaging the neighborly spirit Pinewood Estates was known for. But the more Arlene ranted, the more others privately sided with Veronica, admitting they'd do the same if strangers invaded their property. A few even praised her for standing up for her rights, especially after seeing how some neighbors acted as if the fence belonged to everyone. To bolster her strategy, Veronica next installed a motion-activated sprinkler system that would drench anyone climbing over the fence. The contraption was simple but effective. The moment it detected motion, it unleashed a burst of water strong enough to send trespassers running. On the first night it activated, screams and curses echoed through the neighborhood, followed by the rapid shuffle of retreating footsteps. Fed up with repeated failures, potential gatecrashers finally conceded. No longer could they barge into Veronica's pool without risking green-tinted clothes or a surprise soaking. After weeks of conflict, the backyard went silent. Veronica would occasionally catch glimpses of suspicious faces peering over the fence, but no one dared to cross the boundary again. Arlene, however, persisted in her complaints, posting online accusations that Veronica had overstepped normal neighborly conduct. Veronica responded just once, calmly stating that if a simple lock and civil requests had been respected from the start, none of these measures would have been necessary. Once her stance was made clear, she ignored further provocation. With her backyard finally secure, Veronica found solace in a swim after work: no watchers, no footprints, no half-eaten snacks. She reflected on how something as delightful as a backyard pool could become a battleground when boundaries were not honored. In the quiet evenings, she recognized a sobering reality: some people only change their behavior when faced with tangible consequences. Over time, Pinewood Estates returned to a semblance of normalcy. Veronica maintained polite greetings with those neighbors who had always respected her space, and while the friction with Arlene never entirely faded, it no longer disrupted her daily life. Her story spread as a cautionary tale within the community: if you don't protect what's yours, don't be surprised when others stake an illicit claim. Looking back, Veronica concluded that the fight for her pool was about more than just water and fences. It was about privacy, effort, and the principle that a homeowner's domain should remain their own, unless they explicitly choose to share it. That final victory swim, in crystal clear water free of unwanted visitors, was worth every ounce of frustration, expense, and confrontation she had endured. For Alicia Barlow, life in Rosebridge Heights represented the pinnacle of her years of hard work. She had purchased a modest but charming house with a private swim deck, carefully landscaped to provide a tranquil retreat from the desert heat. Despite the suburban bustle around her, Alicia believed she could forge a peaceful haven behind her tall privacy fence. Her illusions shattered on a scorching afternoon when she noticed puddles of water on the patio, plus a discarded beach mat near the lounge chairs. At first, Alicia chalked it up to an oversight, perhaps she'd left a faucet running, or an animal had wandered through. But the situation became impossible to ignore when she discovered footprints leading away from the swim deck, as though someone had climbed out in a hurry. Puzzled and wary, she spoke with neighbors. Most shrugged dismissively, insisting it was just kids goofing around. Alicia tried not to overreact, but she felt uncomfortable about strangers having free rein of her yard. She fastened a lock on the side gate and hoped that would restore her sense of safety. Her relief was short-lived. Days later, she was startled by laughter echoing from the backyard. Sprinting outside, Alicia found two local teens, Jacob and Ella, confidently enjoying her swim deck. Caught off guard by Alicia's appearance, the pair hastily gathered their belongings and scurried off, leaving behind a couple of soda cans and muddy footprints. Alicia visited their home to address the matter with Mr. and Mrs. Faraday, expecting apologies or at least some embarrassment on their part. Instead, they dismissed her concerns, calling her too uptight. Fed up with the apathy, Alicia opted for more robust measures. She installed outdoor surveillance cameras covering every angle of the yard. A few evenings later, the footage showed a small crowd of adult neighbors strolling in with towels and refreshments, using her swim deck like a public resort. Appalled by their brazenness, Alicia confronted them on the spot, warning she'd call the authorities if this nonsense persisted. One particularly vocal neighbor named Renee fired back, accusing Alicia of being unwelcoming and obsessed with petty rules. Regardless, Alicia stood her ground. She replaced her lock with a sturdier version, only to find it tampered with again after a week. Realizing standard methods wouldn't suffice, Alicia hatched a plan to make intruders think twice about trespassing. First, she treated the water in her swim deck with a special agent that would turn it murky green upon unauthorized use, effectively a chemical-based alarm system. Next, she positioned a towering warning sign, emblazoned with notices about high chemical content and risk of skin irritation. To enhance the ruse, Alicia placed a faux chemical drum near the ladder, marked with a skull and crossbones symbol for dramatic effect. News of Alicia's toxic waters spread quickly through Rosebridge Heights. Those who had once roamed her yard without a second thought found themselves rattled by the possibility of stained swimsuits or, worse, a rash from mystery chemicals. Renee, naturally, vented online about Alicia's tactics, accusing her of turning a friendly neighborhood into a place of paranoia. While the drama simmered, the trespassing slowed considerably. Alicia observed the difference almost immediately. No more voices drifted through her window late at night, and no new footprints marred her patio. Some neighbors whispered that Alicia's approach was extreme, but others admired her tenacity, agreeing that property owners have the right to protect what they worked hard to maintain. Hoping to finalize her protective measures, Alicia installed a motion-activated sprinkler system. The first evening it functioned, she heard shrieks outside, uninvited guests getting a chilling surprise. This incident effectively ended any attempts to invade her yard. Word spread through Rosebridge Heights that Alicia's place was off-limits to casual swimmers. Even those who had once downplayed her concerns recognized that she meant business. Of course, Renee refused to let matters rest. She complained to anyone who would listen, harping on how Alicia's extreme steps had ruined the communal vibe. Alicia, however, no longer felt the need to justify herself extensively. She'd tried polite conversations, minor security enhancements, and open communication. Only when people blatantly ignored her boundaries did she escalate to more dramatic deterrence. As the summer heat peaked, Alicia found her sense of tranquility returning. Gone were the evenings of dreading who might be traipsing around her yard. She took a sunset swim one night, the swirling pool lights illuminating her swim deck. For the first time in weeks, she felt utterly at ease, free from the nagging fear that a group of uninvited visitors would barge in. Reflecting on the ordeal, Alicia recognized it as a lesson in self-advocacy. She learned that not everyone respects polite requests, and some only heed a clear message backed by consequences. The journey had been stressful and often exasperating, but it had also solidified her resolve never to let complacency override her own rights in her home. By summer's end, Rosebridge Heights settled back into its ordinary rhythms. Those who had used Alicia's property without permission found other ways to amuse themselves, less convenient, but far less risky. As for Alicia, she continued living her life, proud that she hadn't buckled under the weight of social pressure or dismissive attitudes. Instead, she emerged with both her swim deck and her peace of mind intact, a testament to the power of standing firm when confronted with disrespect. In quieter moments, she contemplated how easily small acts of entitlement could spiral out of control if left unchecked. People sometimes behave as though communal courtesy extends to trespassing, but Alicia's response proved that private property lines still matter deeply, especially when they symbolized the culmination of one's hard work and independence. Ultimately, she decided it was better to be labeled too strict than to allow others to walk all over her. For Alicia, maintaining that line was well worth a little neighborhood drama. Natalie Morgan relished every moment spent in her tranquil backyard, a small slice of paradise tucked away in Crescent Falls, a suburban neighborhood known for friendly nods and manicured lawns. At 44, Natalie was proud that she had saved, scrimped, and ultimately purchased her dream house. Her crowning jewel was a crystal blue swimming oasis, surrounded by polished stone tiles and towering cypress trees that offered privacy from the outside world. That sense of sanctuary cracked one sweltering August morning when Natalie stepped outside and spotted wet footprints trailing across her patio. A damp beach towel lay abandoned on a lounger, as though its owner had dashed away in a hurry. Confused, Natalie scanned the yard for signs of forced entry but found nothing obvious. Her gate appeared to be closed, and there were no obvious holes in the fencing. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something. Determined to keep an open mind, Natalie chatted with a few neighbors, casually asking if they had noticed any late-night activity. Most simply shrugged, one even laughingly suggesting that, "It's just kids having fun, no big deal." Despite their dismissive tone, Natalie couldn't ignore the unease growing in her gut. After all, she had worked too hard to let complete strangers treat her place like a public water park. Her first step was to secure the side gate with a heavier-duty padlock and a privacy panel. For a few days, everything seemed to return to normal. But in the early dawn hours one weekend, Natalie was awakened by splashing sounds coming from the backyard. Heart pounding, she peered through the window to see two teenagers, Ben and Lucy, recklessly jumping into her pool. Their carefree giggles echoed in the still morning air. Natalie rushed outside, adrenaline fueling her anger. The teens froze like startled deer before clambering out of the pool, snatching their phones and flip-flops, then vaulting over the side fence. Left in their wake were soggy footprints, discarded soda cans, and a shaken homeowner. Determined not to let this slide, Natalie tried locating Ben and Lucy's parents. However, repeated knocks at their door went unanswered. A few days later, Natalie cornered Evelyn, who claimed to be Lucy's mother. Expecting at least an apology, Natalie instead endured eye-rolling. Evelyn dismissed the trespass as teens being teens. Worse, she hinted that Natalie should be flattered people wanted to enjoy her pool. Stunned by this blithe attitude, Natalie realized she had to escalate her security measures. She installed motion sensor cameras around her property, carefully adjusting angles so the entire perimeter of her swimming oasis was covered. If someone hopped the fence again, she'd have proof. Sure enough, the cameras soon captured not just a couple of teens, but an entire group of adults, neighbors from a few streets over, casually swimming, laughing, and even sipping drinks. Furious, Natalie raced home from work early to confront them. When she arrived, she found them lounging in her chairs as if the place was a free-for-all resort. "Leave, right now," Natalie ordered, her voice steady despite her anger. "Next time, I'm calling the police." Though some quickly collected their belongings and scurried away, one woman named Sharon had the audacity to stand her ground and argue. "You're breaking the spirit of Crescent Falls," Sharon said, arms crossed. "Neighbors used to look out for each other. Now you're slamming gates in our faces." Natalie couldn't believe the entitlement. She had done nothing to these neighbors but refused them the right to trespass. Feeling her patience fray, she spelled it out, "This is my property. I pay the mortgage, the taxes, and the maintenance. If you want a pool, get your own. Otherwise, stay away." She threatened to involve law enforcement if the trespassing continued, but even that didn't seem to faze Sharon. Over the next week, whispers swirled around Crescent Falls that Natalie Morgan was uptight and petty. Sharon even posted a scathing rant on a local community forum, painting Natalie as a recluse who didn't understand communal bonding. Undeterred, Natalie realized these neighbors wouldn't stop unless they faced real consequences, something beyond polite warnings. That's when she devised a creative deterrent plan. She began by reinforcing her fence, adding a taller section that was difficult to climb. Next, she purchased a specialized chemical dye meant for pools, formulated to turn the water a vivid green if someone swam without neutralizing chemicals first. She posted a large sign by the pool, reading, "Caution, experimental chemical treatment in progress. Enter at your own risk." To complete the ruse, she placed a dummy hazardous materials container near the pool ladder, slapping on bright warning labels. After implementing these changes, Natalie spent an anxious few days waiting to see if it worked. Sure enough, a rumor spread that Ms. Morgan's pool water can stain your skin or cause rashes. While some neighbors scoffed, others grew wary. Combined with the cameras, the locked gate, and a new fence, the dye threat was enough to keep most trespassers at bay. The real test came when Sharon, the most vocal critic, tried to call Natalie's bluff. Late one night, the cameras recorded Sharon entering the backyard with a friend, presumably testing to see if this "green water" story was genuine. A motion alert pinged Natalie's phone, prompting her to speak into the system's built-in speaker, "You're on camera. I'm calling the police." The intruders fled instantly. Natalie didn't even have to step outside. Still, rumors swirl easily in a suburban neighborhood, and Sharon took to social media again, complaining about chemical hazards that could potentially endanger the community's children. Natalie responded publicly, once, explaining that if neighbors hadn't broken into her yard, she wouldn't have resorted to such measures. The majority seemed to side with her. Personal property rights trumped neighbors' convenience. Spurred by her success, Natalie added one final measure, a motion-activated sprinkler aimed right at the fence line. Anyone who dared vault the fence would be greeted with a powerful burst of cold water. Word spread fast. The next time a trespasser tried to test the gate, shrieks and frantic splashing erupted in the darkness, followed by hurried footsteps retreating down the street. Caught on camera, the incident confirmed that no fence was unassailable, but it also proved that a well-prepared homeowner could be equally resourceful. Over the subsequent weeks, trespassing dropped to zero. Natalie found that she could once again lounge by her swimming oasis in peace, enjoying late evening swims under starry skies without fretting about uninvited guests. Though Sharon still muttered about lost neighborly spirit, few people took her complaints seriously anymore. After all, real community spirit should never hinge on disregarding someone else's boundaries. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, Natalie realized she had learned a valuable lesson about human nature. Some people respect polite warnings, others only respond to direct consequences. Her best strategy was a combination of unwavering consistency, visible deterrence, and a willingness to stand up for her rights. With the neighbor drama finally subsiding, Natalie was free to savor the quiet she had fought so hard to reclaim. As time passed, even Sharon's hostility began to fade from daily conversation. In the end, Crescent Falls returned to its usual calm routines. Natalie occasionally shared a friendly wave with neighbors, those who recognized that she wasn't an unkind recluse, but simply someone who valued the property she had worked for. Her crystal blue swimming oasis shone as a testament to resilience and the power of firm boundaries. Each ripple in the water reminded Natalie that peace often has a price, but once established, it's worth every ounce of effort. Serena Caldwell adored her cozy home in Magnolia Springs, a suburban enclave of winding streets, pastel houses, and blooming flower beds. At 46, she prided herself on having purchased the property entirely on her own, a testament to years of determined saving and careful planning. The centerpiece of her yard was a sun-kissed swimming pool, surrounded by tasteful landscaping and a few tall hedges for privacy. So, when Serena stepped outside one morning and discovered damp footprints on the stone patio, a knot of concern formed in her stomach. Someone had clearly been using the pool overnight. A lonely beach towel tossed on a chaise lounge confirmed her suspicions. Disturbed by the idea of strangers lounging in her yard after hours, she confided in a handful of neighbors, but many shrugged, offering nonchalant comments like, "Oh, it's probably bored teenagers," as though that made it acceptable. Determined to keep the peace without overreacting, Serena secured her backyard by installing a sturdier lock on the fence gate and placing a "private property" sign near the entrance. Days passed uneventfully, until one sultry afternoon, she heard laughter echoing from the patio. Peering through a window, she spotted two teenagers, Ian and Marisol, racing each other across her pool. Shocked by their audacity, Serena burst outside, only to watch them scramble out of the water and dash off, leaving behind half-eaten snack wrappers and more soggy footprints. Incensed, Serena marched down the street to find their parents. Mr. and Mrs. Hampton listened with forced politeness but brushed off the gravity of the situation, implying that kids would be kids, and Serena shouldn't be so uptight. This dismissive attitude stung. Serena had hoped for support, or at least an acknowledgement that the intrusion was unacceptable. Instead, she found herself alone in her concerns. Feeling violated, she installed security cameras in strategic spots around the yard. She also wrote down the details of each intrusion, hoping to compile evidence. That weekend, she left home briefly for errands, only to receive a notification on her phone from the camera app. Live footage showed a group of adults, neighbors she vaguely recognized, enjoying her pool as though it were a public amenity. Outraged, she rushed back, stormed into the yard, and demanded they leave immediately. While most grabbed their things and fled, one man named Elliot accused Serena of being unneighborly, even going so far as to hint that her negative attitude ruined the Magnolia Springs charm. Frustrated and disillusioned, Serena realized that a simple lock and camera footage wouldn't deter these trespassers. They didn't appear to fear the consequences, likely because they assumed she wouldn't call the police over a pool. It was time for a more creative deterrent. Recalling a tip she once read online, Serena decided to treat the pool water with a special dye that would discolor upon extended contact, turning swimmers an embarrassing shade of green if they stayed in long enough without neutralizing chemicals. She also placed a large, dramatic warning sign by the gate, proclaiming, "High chemical content, swim at your own risk." For added effect, she left a fake hazardous container near the pool pump, complete with ominous stickers. When word spread about Serena's dangerously chemical-laden pool, the community's opinion split. Some labeled her cunning plan genius, while others, like Elliot, slammed her for overreacting. Yet, the trespassing eased almost immediately. The risk of green-stained skin or hair seemed too high a price to pay for a free dip. Despite the initial success, tension hung in the air. A few neighbors condemned Serena on local social media, calling her measures extreme and lamenting that Magnolia Springs was losing its friendly spirit. Undaunted, Serena refused to be swayed by public grumbling. She had asked politely, installed locks, even offered warnings face-to-face, only to be met with shrugs and dismissive remarks. If the neighborhood wouldn't respect her boundaries out of courtesy, they would at least fear the consequences of ignoring them. Sensing that some might still test her resolve, Serena took one more step. She hooked up a motion-activated sprinkler that activated if anyone attempted climbing over the fence. The first time it triggered, a pair of late-night intruders yelped in surprise, stumbling away drenched and cursing. The camera recorded every dripping second, and Serena couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. Her firm stance soon paid dividends. Neighbors began to realize that her property was simply off-limits. Elliot and a few others continued to gripe at block parties or online forums, but Serena ignored them. Sometimes she felt a pang of sadness. She had moved to Magnolia Springs hoping for a sense of community. Instead, she encountered a subset of residents who believed personal boundaries were negotiable if it meant they got to enjoy someone else's amenities. In the weeks that followed, the tension cooled. People stopped approaching the fence, and trespassing incidents dropped to zero. One morning, while trimming hedges, Serena found herself chatting with Mrs. Hampton again. Surprisingly, the older woman seemed less confrontational this time. "You know, we all want what's best for our kids," she said, awkwardly trying to bridge the gap. Serena mustered a diplomatic smile, though she remained cautious. The memory of being dismissed as uptight still stung. A few days later, Elliot posted a final rant on the community message board, calling Serena's solutions unpleasant and paranoid. Hardly anyone responded, suggesting that most neighbors either agreed with Serena or had grown tired of the drama. For her part, Serena had long since decided not to engage in online disputes. Action spoke louder than words, and her actions had reclaimed her backyard as her own. With the situation stabilized, Serena returned to her once beloved routine of floating in a pool under the night sky, perhaps with a cool drink in hand. Each ripple of water felt like a reminder that she had stood up for her rights, despite initial pushback. On warm weekends, she'd invite close friends over, ones who respected boundaries and were grateful for her hospitality. The laughter of her guests warmed her heart, reminding her that a sense of community could exist, provided it was built on mutual respect. Reflecting on everything, Serena concluded that she had inadvertently taught Magnolia Springs a lesson: property lines matter, and no one has the right to decide that another person's space is communal just for their convenience. She acknowledged that in an ideal world, neighbors would look out for one another, but that spirit shouldn't translate to ignoring a homeowner's rules. Sometimes, it took strong deterrence, and a bit of creative cunning, to enforce those basic principles. Ultimately, the turmoil faded into memory. Serena's pool returned to being a private oasis, her stress levels dipped, and the hush of a peaceful backyard replaced the echoes of uninvited splashing. Whenever she spotted the large sign warning of chemical content, she smiled, a testament to how a measured yet firm response could thwart even the most brazen intruders. And in that calm, shimmering water, she found the solace and satisfaction she'd strived for all along. 43-year-old Evelyn Mills had always dreamed of owning a tranquil home in Riverstone Hills, a quaint residential area famed for well-kept gardens and neighborly traditions. After countless hours of overtime and careful penny pinching, Evelyn finally purchased a house with a pristine backyard pool, its water so clear it looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. For a time, she believed she'd found her perfect sanctuary. That illusion shattered one blistering July afternoon. Returning from a short grocery run, Evelyn discovered wet footprints trailing from the pool ladder to the fence line. A damp t-shirt had been tossed onto one of her lawn chairs. It seemed someone had helped themselves to a refreshing dip while she was away. Alarmed and rattled, Evelyn talked to a few neighbors, but none claimed to know anything. One neighbor even shrugged and suggested that, it's summertime, people just want to cool off. Frustration rose like a knot in Evelyn's chest. She decided to lock the gate leading into her backyard with a heavy chain and a new padlock. A few days of peace followed, lulling her into a sense of false security. Then, a sudden noise late one night jolted her awake, loud giggles and splashing. Peering through an upstairs window, she spied two teenage siblings, Michael and Chloe, engaged in a cannonball contest into her pristine pool. Evelyn rushed out, fury simmering, but the teens clambered over the fence before she could reach them, leaving a trail of drippy footprints across her carefully tiled patio. Incensed, Evelyn cornered Michael and Chloe's mother, Mrs. Rollins, the next day. Expecting some remorse or, at minimum, an apology, she was taken aback when Mrs. Rollins brushed it off. "They're kids," the woman said, arms crossed, "and it's only water. Besides, you can afford to share." Evelyn left that conversation feeling disrespected and more resolved than ever to protect her home. She set up security cameras around the yard, ensuring every angle of her precious pool was covered. Sure enough, within a week, the cameras recorded a small group of adults she barely recognized, maybe they lived on the far side of Riverstone Hills, having a mini pool party while Evelyn was at work. Outraged, she returned home mid-afternoon and demanded they leave at once, threatening to call the authorities if they didn't. One of the uninvited guests, a woman named Clarissa, raised her voice, accusing Evelyn of being antisocial and ruining the friendly vibe of Riverstone Hills. Swallowing her anger, Evelyn restated the obvious: it was her home, her bills, her liability. She had every right to decide who used her pool. "If you want a place to swim," she said through gritted teeth, "get your own, or at least ask permission." Clarissa stormed off with a huff, vowing to tell the neighborhood that Evelyn was heartless and overprotective. Despite the emotional toll, Evelyn refused to cave. If neighbors wanted to label her as overprotective, so be it. She had worked too hard to let them treat her yard like a free recreation center. Undeterred trespassers continued to test her limits, cutting the lock on the gate one evening. That was the final straw for Evelyn. She decided she needed a plan that would discourage these intruders once and for all, something more deterrent than a basic lock or stern words. Recalling a trick she'd seen on a homeowner's forum, Evelyn bought a special pool dye that reacted to any extended contact, turning the water a vivid shade of green. To make the deterrent even more convincing, she erected a large warning sign at the entrance to the pool area, proclaiming, "Caution, chemical treatment, swim at your own risk." She also placed a fake hazardous materials drum near the filtration system, complete with warning labels and a large skull icon. The effect was immediate. Gossip spread that Evelyn Mill's pool was toxic, possibly resulting in rashes or discolored skin. A few even claimed that just standing near the water caused itching. Though hyperbolic, these rumors fulfilled Evelyn's wish to keep trespassers out. Michael and Chloe disappeared from the scene, presumably deterred by the idea of green-stained swimsuits, and the group of adult freeloaders found other amusements. Of course, Clarissa doubled down on her criticisms. She posted on social media, decrying Evelyn's extreme measures and fanning the flames of a neighborhood debate. Some defended Evelyn, arguing that she had every right to protect her property. Others echoed Clarissa's view that Riverstone Hills was supposed to be a family-friendly place, implying that Evelyn's stance hurt community spirit. Evelyn tried not to let the negativity consume her. She focused on fine-tuning her security, reinforcing the fence, adjusting the cameras for better nighttime coverage, and even installing a motion-activated sprinkler at the top of the fence line. If anyone dared climb over, they'd get a powerful blast of water. On the few nights it triggered, shrieks of shock and hurried footsteps confirmed that the contraption worked flawlessly. Still, Clarissa's disapproval lingered. She confronted Evelyn one weekend at a local yard sale, complaining loudly about how inhospitable it was to hoard a pool for oneself. Evelyn calmly replied that it was never about hoarding, it was about basic respect and permission. "I'm not opposed to sharing with people I trust," she clarified, "but I won't stand for people who break locks and treat my property like it's public domain." As the weeks slipped by, incidents dwindled to zero. Evelyn's pool stood as placid and clear as ever, untouched by the unwanted midnight parties. Free from constant anxiety, she resumed her weekend routine. Inviting close friends over for barbecues, floating on an inflatable lounge, and sometimes savoring a quiet swim under the moonlit sky. When she did scroll through social media, Evelyn occasionally spotted Clarissa's lingering complaints, but the posts gained little traction. It seemed that most neighbors had grown weary of the drama. Some quietly admired Evelyn's ingenuity, confiding that they too had faced boundary issues, though perhaps not as brazen. The ongoing saga, if nothing else, reminded everyone that respect for personal space was an essential part of community living. As Evelyn settled back into her peaceful routine, she thought about how quickly things had escalated. It all began with a few innocent footprints in a damp t-shirt, trivial signs that belied the deeper disrespect. The turning point was realizing that cordial conversation wouldn't solve the problem. Only a combination of firm boundaries, clear consequences, and unwavering resolve managed to deter the intruders. In quieter moments, Evelyn felt a twinge of regret that her relationship with some neighbors had become strained. She had always envisioned Riverstone Hills as a place of mutual care and camaraderie. But she also believed that no sense of neighborliness should force one to accept repeated trespassing. Her stance was a lesson in balancing community ties with personal rights. Sometimes, a homeowner must choose self-preservation over appeasement. Looking around her yard, Evelyn admired how the cypress trees rustled gently, framing the shimmering water below. She could finally enjoy this space she'd nurtured with her own resources. No more locking doors in fear of who might be outside, no more anxious thoughts about returning home to a yard full of strangers. Instead, that tension had been replaced by a sense of well-earned tranquility. In the end, Evelyn's story spread beyond Riverstone Hills, told among friends and relatives as a cautionary tale about property lines and the lengths to which some will go when they think there are no consequences. But to Evelyn, the moral was simpler: people will test boundaries if they believe they can get away with it. Show them otherwise, and peace becomes possible again. Gazing at her clear blue pool, Evelyn recognized that sometimes you had to stand firm, perhaps with a little ingenuity, to keep what's yours safe, secure, and truly your own. Carmen Bradley basked in the pride of her cozy bungalow in Lakeview Grove, especially the small backyard pool she had painstakingly installed 2 summers prior. For Carmen, it wasn't just a water feature, it symbolized her independence and the fruit of many years' hard work. Though Lakeview Grove was known for neighborly smiles, she never anticipated a silent boundary crossing that would soon disrupt her sense of ownership. One morning, Carmen spotted a series of wet footprints near the pool ladder, along with a discarded flip-flop by the patio table. While perplexed, she tried to give her neighbors the benefit of the doubt, wondering if someone had hopped the fence by mistake. But after noticing more footprints the following day, it became clear: someone was repeatedly sneaking in to use her pool. Curious and unsettled, Carmen approached several people on her street, hoping for clues. Most simply waved off her concerns, saying, "Kids are bored," or "It's too hot out, can you blame them?" Feeling her frustration grow, Carmen secured the gate with a heavy lock and added a "No trespassing" sign. She believed a firm yet polite warning would suffice. It didn't. Days later, she caught 2 teenage boys, Ross and Eddie, enjoying a splash in her pool. The moment she shouted from the door, they leapt out, grabbed their towels, and fled. Seeking answers, Carmen knocked on their parents' door, only to find Mr. and Mrs. Hogan indifferent. They labeled her concerns an overreaction, insisting the boys were harmless. Fed up, Carmen installed security cameras around her property. Not long afterward, she reviewed footage showing a cluster of adults, some from a nearby cul-de-sac, relaxing by her pool. Outraged, she confronted them in person, threatening to call the police if they didn't leave immediately. Although they scurried off, one neighbor named Brianna lashed out, calling Carmen stingy and accusing her of being antisocial. Facing ongoing trespassing, Carmen decided on a unique strategy. She purchased a special dye that would turn the pool water green if anyone tried to swim in it without her authorization. Then she placed a large sign that read, "Chemical experiment in progress, swim at your own risk." Nearby, she left a fake chemical container plastered with warning labels to reinforce the idea that her pool was no longer a carefree spot. Word spread rapidly through Lakeview Grove. People muttered about Carmen's extreme tactics, but it also kept them away. Brianna complained loudly on social media, claiming Carmen was destroying community spirit. Carmen's response was calm and measured: if individuals respected her boundaries, there'd be no need for deterrence. She reminded them that trespassing was both rude and illegal, and that she had tried to solve it amicably first. Even so, a few thrill-seekers tested her patience. That's why Carmen installed one final measure: a motion sprinkler system along the fence line. Anyone who climbed over received a frigid dousing, captured on camera for Carmen's records. Squeals of shock echoed in the night whenever someone triggered it. Soon enough, the attempted intrusions stopped altogether. Over time, Lakeview Grove settled into its usual quiet rhythms. Carmen found that her pool remained her own private refuge once more, free from footprints and leftover towels. Though Brianna persisted in calling her overzealous, most neighbors seemed relieved to put the drama behind them. With the tension diffused, Carmen reflected on the ordeal. She realized it wasn't simply about water or chlorine, it was about mutual respect. In a community, lines must be drawn, or else they'll be crossed. Carmen had no desire for conflict, but neither would she allow open disregard for her property. In the end, her firm stance reclaimed her peace and reminded Lakeview Grove that personal boundaries are there for a reason. Linda Roth cherished her quaint residence in Autumn Hills, especially the backyard pool she had painstakingly revamped over the past year. While many neighbors enjoyed casual block parties and street gatherings, Linda preferred quieter company. She found her serenity by the water, reading novels under the shade of a tall oak tree while gentle ripples danced in the sunlight. That tranquility evaporated one weekend when Linda noticed sopping footprints snaking across the stone tiles around her pool. She also spotted a towel crumpled near the fence, none of which belonged to her. Alarmed, she realized someone had trespassed in her absence. Turning to friends in the area, Linda was met with shrugs. One even joked, "Well, at least they put your pool to good use." Unamused, Linda locked the gate securely and posted a small sign warning of private property. She hoped this would suffice. It didn't. Days later, she caught two neighborhood teens, Derek and Ava, frolicking in her pool as though it were a community center. The moment Linda appeared, the teens grabbed their belongings and fled, dripping water all the way. Their parents brushed off Linda's complaints, calling her reaction too serious for a minor infraction. Determined to preserve her oasis, Linda installed surveillance cameras. Soon enough, she was horrified to watch footage of a small gathering of adults, people she only vaguely recognized, enjoying an unauthorized pool party. Infuriated, she ordered them to leave and threatened legal action if it continued. One outspoken neighbor, Beatrice, accused Linda of being unfriendly and singled her out online as a killjoy who didn't appreciate community bonding. Realizing that stern words and locks weren't enough, Linda devised a clever deterrent. She treated the water with a color-changing dye, ensuring it would turn a murky green if someone lingered too long without neutralizing agents. To drive the point home, she erected a sign screaming, "Chemical hazard, swim at your own risk," and placed a faux hazard barrel near the pool's edge. The effect was immediate. Rumors spread that Linda's water could stain skin or cause rashes. Beatrice huffed louder than ever, slamming Linda on social media for alienating neighbors. Yet Linda refused to back down. She explained, just once, that if people had respected her private space, none of these measures would exist. Meanwhile, she added a motion-activated sprinkler to soak any fence jumpers, capturing each startled reaction on camera. Predictably, the trespassing stopped. Linda's yard returned to a haven of quiet. When a final online rant by Beatrice garnered little sympathy, Linda knew she had won the standoff without ever raising her voice. She returned to her peaceful routine, swims at sunrise, novels under the oak's shade, relieved that no more footprints or crumpled towels marked her territory. Reflecting on her experience, Linda recognized how quickly some neighbors felt entitled to her property once they assumed she wouldn't fight back. She found it unfortunate that it took chemical signs and a sprinkler to secure what a simple, "no trespassing," should have accomplished. Still, in reclaiming her backyard, Linda reaffirmed an important principle: true community stems from mutual respect, not from trespassing for fun. In Autumn Hills, word spread fast that Linda's pool was off-limits unless invited. And Linda could finally enjoy her personal retreat in peace. Miranda Foster cherished her cozy bungalow in Maplewood Grove, where she had lived for the past 5 years. When she finally saved enough money to install a backyard swimming deck, she believed she'd secured her personal haven to unwind after work. She took great pride in maintaining it, keeping the water pristine and surrounding the deck with lush plants. Her backyard was more than a space, it was an extension of her dreams. That peace started unraveling the morning Miranda noticed wet footprints crossing the wooden planks near her swimming deck. A discarded beach towel dangled over the railing, none of which belonged to her. Confused, she tried to brush it off as a one-time occurrence, yet the incident lingered in her thoughts. After all, Maplewood Grove was known for its neighborly vibe, but this felt like a breach of personal boundaries. Seeking clarity, Miranda casually asked around, but most neighbors shrugged, some even chuckling that, "at least someone's enjoying your water." Unsettled by the dismissive response, Miranda decided to secure her gate with a stronger padlock, adding a small, private deck sign for good measure. She hoped a gentle warning would prevent any further late-night swimmers. It didn't. Days later, Miranda heard splashing around midnight. Racing outside in her pajamas, she discovered two teenage siblings, Toby and Hannah, gleefully jumping into her swimming deck as if it were theirs to use. The moment she shouted, they scrambled out, grabbing their phones and flip-flops before darting into the darkness. Stunned, Miranda confronted their parents the next day, expecting an apology. Instead, she was told not to overreact and that, it's just water. Feeling betrayed by the neighborhood's casual attitude, Miranda installed motion-activated security cameras, determined to catch anyone else intruding. Sure enough, the footage revealed not just Toby and Hannah, but a group of adult acquaintances, folks who lived a few blocks away, turning her yard into their personal lounge while she was away at work. Outraged, Miranda rushed home early to find them sipping sodas and sunning themselves as though it were a public resort. She demanded they leave, threatening to call the police if it happened again. Though most gathered their belongings hurriedly, one bold neighbor named Andrea sneered that Miranda was killing the Maplewood Grove spirit by hoarding her deck. Anger flared in Miranda's chest, but she remained firm, declaring that her backyard was no one else's to claim. The tension escalated when Andrea posted on social media, labeling Miranda a selfish homeowner. Some neighbors echoed Andrea's sentiment, but Miranda refused to cave in. Realizing that polite requests and a simple padlock were not enough, Miranda devised a plan. She purchased a chemical dye specifically designed for swimming areas, one that would turn the water a glaring green if someone swam without the proper neutralizing agent. Next, she erected a large warning sign near the deck, announcing, "Warning, experimental chemical in use, swim at your own risk." To enhance the deterrent, Miranda placed a faux chemical drum, festooned with hazard symbols, beside the filtration pump. Her scheme worked wonders. Rumors spread that Miranda's deck was now loaded with mysterious chemicals. The teenage siblings kept their distance, and Andrea's clique found other pastimes. But some neighbors muttered about how extreme Miranda's methods had become. Miranda ignored the gossip. After all, she had tried to address it calmly. This was merely the result of repeated trespassing and dismissive attitudes. Still worried that certain thrill-seekers might test her boundaries, Miranda installed a motion sprinkler system along the fence line, soaking anyone who tried to hop it. The first time it activated, screams cut through the night air, followed by frantic footsteps. Miranda watched the camera feed with an odd mix of relief and amusement. At last, her intruders understood that her yard was off-limits. In the ensuing weeks, the trespassing plummeted to none. Miranda could once again relax by her swimming deck without wondering who might have been lurking there hours before. Andrea continued to rant online, painting Miranda as cold-hearted, but the drama no longer fazed her. True neighbors, Miranda reasoned, wouldn't treat someone's private property like a communal hangout. They'd offer respect instead of entitlement. Sipping lemonade at dusk, Miranda observed the still water, marveling at how a few deterrents had restored her comfort. She reflected on what she'd learned: boundaries were necessary, and if people wouldn't respect them willingly, one had to enforce them. She felt a twinge of sadness that a place known for friendliness could hide such disregard for personal property, but she resolved that it was a small price to pay to secure her sanctuary. Over time, Maplewood Grove returned to its predictable suburban rhythm, and neighbors found other reasons to gather: barbecues, park picnics, and the like. Miranda politely waved to those who had once belittled her concerns, satisfied that no matter what they thought, her home, and her swimming deck, belonged solely to her once more. Fiona Ellis always cherished the dream of owning a home in Pinecrest Glen, a peaceful enclave where tree-lined streets and pastel homes formed a picturesque landscape. After years of saving, she secured a modest house with a small but inviting backyard pool, her favorite spot to unwind after a long day. For a while, the calm ambience and supportive neighbors made her feel she had discovered a perfect haven. That illusion shattered one morning when Fiona found wet footprints on the tiles near the pool ladder. A crumpled beach towel sat on a chair, none of which belonged to her. Though unsettled, she assumed it might be a minor misunderstanding, maybe someone thought they had the wrong yard. She casually mentioned it to a few neighbors, but most shrugged, joking that, at least your pool's getting used. Fiona tried a friendly approach first. She placed a new lock on the side gate and posted a discreet sign reading, "Private Pool." Days later, however, she was startled by giggles at dusk. Peeking through her window, she saw two local teens, Jason and Rose, happily splashing around her pool as if it were a public amenity. By the time she stepped outside to confront them, they had already dashed off, leaving soda cans and drenched footprints in their wake. When she spoke to their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, they shrugged it off as harmless summer fun. Appalled by this dismissive attitude, Fiona installed security cameras overlooking the entire backyard. She had barely finished the setup before discovering footage of a group of adults helping themselves to her pool during her work hours. Outraged, Fiona left her office early one day to find them sunbathing on her loungers, drinks in hand. Her anger boiled over as she demanded they leave immediately, warning she'd report trespassing if it continued. One neighbor, Harriet, took offense, accusing Fiona of being antisocial and unfairly territorial. Undeterred, Fiona spelled out the facts: it was her property, she paid for its upkeep and carried the liability. If Harriet or anyone else wanted to swim, they should have sought permission, not broken in. Harriet scoffed, complaining publicly that Fiona was ruining Pinecrest Glen's friendly spirit. Recognizing that firm words and a padlock weren't enough, Fiona decided on a clever deterrent. She treated the pool water with a special dye, one that would turn the water green if intruders swam without a neutralizing chemical. Next, she placed a warning sign by the gate, declaring, "Caution, chemical treatment ongoing, swim at own risk." A mock hazardous materials container, plastered with ominous stickers, completed the ruse. Word spread quickly: Fiona's pool might cause rashes or discolor clothing. Jason and Rose stopped visiting, too spooked by rumors of green-tinted skin. Harriet, however, was undeterred. She publicly called Fiona's tactics drastic, accusing her of alienating the neighborhood. Nevertheless, the results were undeniable. Trespassers vanished, leaving Fiona's pool finally empty of uninvited guests. To be extra cautious, Fiona installed a motion-activated sprinkler along the fence. Anyone bold enough to climb it would be met with a sudden blast of icy water. The first time it activated, the shrieks of startled intruders alerted half the block. Laughing softly at her camera footage, Fiona felt vindicated. She'd offered courtesy and had been rebuffed. Now, at least, she could protect her backyard in peace. Days passed, and Pinecrest Glen settled back into its gentle routine. Harriet continued to grumble, posting on local social media pages that Fiona was destroying the sense of community. However, fewer neighbors engaged in the drama, and many silently supported Fiona's right to secure her own property. After all, what kind of community demanded someone sacrifice their privacy for others' convenience? Fiona resumed her leisurely late-night swims, floating on the water under the stars without fear of discovering strangers in her pool. She no longer worried about returning from work to find footprints or half-eaten snacks scattered around. While Harriet's complaints lingered in the online chatter, Fiona found she could ignore them. She had learned that sometimes doing the right thing for oneself meant becoming a temporary villain in the eyes of those who felt entitled. In quieter moments, Fiona reflected on how quickly a pleasant suburb could foster resentment when boundaries weren't respected. People she once waved to in passing had revealed a sense of entitlement that clashed with her simple desire for privacy. She concluded that kindness didn't mean letting neighbors trample one's property rights. Ultimately, setting and enforcing firm limits had proven essential, and even if it ruffled feathers, it restored the tranquility she craved. Over the weeks, any tension in Pinecrest Glen faded, replaced by the usual hum of suburban life: dog walkers, weekend barbecues, and children biking in the cul-de-sacs. Fiona felt no regret about the lengths she went to defend her pool. It remained a testament to the fact that standing up for what you've built is never something to apologize for. Gliding through the water at dusk, she savored the renewed stillness, confident that no uninvited visitors would disturb her sanctuary ever again.